So I'm very excited. I can now tell you about the work we did last year and our findings that we published in the Strengthening Unity report on the value of standards in healthcare. I won't start with that right away, though. I wanted to also take the opportunity to talk a little bit more broadly about the trends in healthcare, particularly in the supply chain, and how we see the industry evolving. We do a lot of work in the area, and it's a changing space. So what we thought we would do instead of, well, I usually start a presentation with 10 or 15 slides talking about what the current situation is and how things are changing and what that means. We made a short video animation to make it a little bit more fun. So this will show you some of the major trends that we see in the healthcare supply chain globally, and then we're going to do a vision of what the future could look like. And of course, whenever you predict the future, you're going to be wrong. But it's intended to give us something to think about and what we need to do in order to realize that. So we will play that video first to just kind of introduce everything. And then we're going to take a step back and say, okay, well, we should actually take a look at where we are today. What is working well? What is not working well? How can we make the supply chain function better? And then in the last part, we will talk specifically about the role of standards. And we'll do two things. We'll summarize the findings that we described in our report, and we'll also play back the questionnaires which you all filled out, and thank you very, very much for that. Analyze all the results, and we have some interesting findings to talk through, and you can reflect on what you thought was important and challenging about standards. So we start with the animation regarding the future of the healthcare supply chain.
Pharma supply chain. Ready? Percentage. Pharma supply chain. Ready? I do. Pharma supply chain is undergoing rapid change, with more change to come. Are you ready? Global pharmaceutical sales will increase by 50% in the next 10 years. Most of the growth will be from outside the US and the top 5 European countries. Global trade balances in pharma are growing 2 times faster than other industries. Contract manufacturing is expected to increase to 25% of the market by 2016. A significant portion of this will be in emerging markets. We need to be ready to manage a more global supply chain. For example, China's healthcare spend as a percentage of GDP in 2018 is expected to be twice as large as compared with 1995. Many governments are taking steps to rein in healthcare spend. We believe the generics market share will grow by 50% over the next 10 years. The pace of approvals in biosimilars is accelerating. Also, increased consolidation in the channel will increase pressure on the manufacturers. Pharma supply chain will need to be more cost competitive and efficient to manage the margin pressure. On top of the margin pressures, supply chain complexity is increasing. More of our sales are coming from emerging markets. The number of SKUs for packaging lines that McKinsey's Phobos benchmarking has tracked over the last few years has gone up by more than 50%. We believe that with the rapidly decreasing cost of mapping the human genome, there will be even more push for personalized medicines, increasing complexity for the supply chain. Supply chain risks and uncertainties are increasing. Supply chain disruptions seem to be increasing in frequency and intensity. Companies will need to properly design the supply chain to manage risks and uncertainties, as well as secure their supply chain. With increased complexity and external disruptions, our jobs will become more challenging. We will need to build a supply chain that is segmented, responsive, and agile. Technology is rapidly evolving. Old and new technologies enable inventory and shipment tracking, and potentially unit dose tracking through the entire supply chain. However, it will be critical for the industry to agree on a common data standard. Cloud technology now enables real-time sharing of data across partners in the supply chain. New technologies within warehouses are intended to improve productivity. We are collecting more and more information by the second, and supply chain will have to manage and interpret this data in real time. The big question to ask is whether all this technology will be a friend or a fad. Only time will tell. So what does the future look like for the pharma supply chain? Let's look at one possible scenario of where the pharma supply chain can go over the next 10 years. In the traditional batch manufacturing process, inventory builds up at intermediate steps, with typical lead times of 8 weeks or more. Continuous manufacturing will allow smaller production runs, eliminate in-process inventory holds, and significantly reduce batch release times. The smaller production runs and increased agility will allow pharma supply chains to react better to complexity and uncertainty. Current pharma supply chain can be long and inefficient, with redundant warehouses and transport lanes in many cases. We believe that the industry will collaborate to remove waste from the supply chain and make it more agile. We believe this will lead to a significant reduction in inventory and distribution costs, probably in the 50 to 70% range. We believe a more compact supply chain and end-to-end tracking would lead to a secure supply chain. Recalls would be executed effectively and immediately. Bedside scanning would significantly reduce medical errors. Additionally, partners across the supply chain will share critical data. Point of sale information would be available real-time, which will enable automatic inventory and order management and improve the efficiency of the supply chain. With the right infrastructure in place, we will be able to scan the identification on the drugs we receive. We will be able to get all the pertinent information that ensures that the drug has come through a secure supply chain and is safe for consumption. This initial scan can set up auto reminders that can be used to track schedule adherence and provide alerts to primary caregivers when the drug is not consumed on time. Embedded chips or alternative technologies, combined with real-time transmission of biometrics information, will help caregivers track progress and companies track efficacy of drugs. Combined with data on genome sequences, companies can create targeted drugs that will then lead to increased complexity for the supply chain, along with big data. Well-managed supply chain information and physical flows will provide pharma companies competitive advantage, creating great outcomes for your patients.
So that was an introduction to some of the trends that we see, and one possible scenario for how the future might develop. And I think, as you can see, certainly possibility for exciting things, but a lot has to happen if healthcare could work like that someday. And among which one of the common themes is, right, that we think there's going to be a lot more. There's a lot of value from connecting different companies along the supply chain down into the hospital. That obviously requires standardized information coding and communication. So standards will be a big part of that. If we think about where we are today then, and how big is the gap to potentially where we want to go, just bring up a few statistics as examples. The first one is obsolescence, or product write-offs and product waste. If we think about the comparison between retail products, in this case a dairy product with a very short shelf life of just 2 weeks, if we look at and see how much obsolescence there is for milk, it's the same as for drugs. So you got on the one hand a product that is good for 2 weeks, and on the other hand products which are good for 2 years or more. And in fact the supply chain control is about the same in both cases, right? We can manage to do as good for milk as we can do for drugs. We should be able to do much better for drugs because they have a much longer shelf life. Another example is agility, or the responsiveness of the healthcare supply chain. Again, we look at what's achievable in other industries, and of course these are not necessarily completely fair comparisons, but they do illustrate how much improvement potential there is. And in the case of electronics, right, you can go on the web and order a laptop which has custom components in there, etc. You can have it delivered within roughly a week, while in pharma the lead times are very, very long, and for medical products typically as well. So just this means that it's very hard to respond to changes in demand, get products where they need to go quickly. And that then again leads to having to build up large inventory, which leads to the problem of having to write off products if they're not used on time. And talking about the inventory, again, if we compare this to the consumer sector, and you look at how much inventory is stored at the manufacturer, a distributor in the store, it's 1 or 2 months. But in the healthcare supply chain, we have 4 to 10 months of inventory typically. So a huge amount, even though supply is quite predictable in most cases. So there isn't really a need for that. And the implication, of course, is that this ties up a huge amount of capital. There's about $500 billion of capital tied up in inventory in the healthcare supply chain worldwide. So you can imagine even improving that a little bit, saves billions of dollars, and we can probably do much better than that. And in a situation where all countries are obviously facing rising expenses in their healthcare systems, you don't want to tie up any cash anywhere you don't need it. So we do see a big need to improve. The animation also showed some statistics on patient safety, rapidly rising number of recalls. There is a lot of regulatory scrutiny, and suppliers are more often than not have some issues with compliance and in their manufacturing facilities. And then also, as we see now from an efficiency point of view, there's a lot of improvement that can be made. This chart here just shows some comparisons to what's been done in consumer goods, which is which is another obviously regulated industry where service levels, so product availability is better, the inventory coverage is a lot lower, and the cost of supply chain distribution is about 2 or 3 times lower as well. So if we take that as an aspiration and what the levels we want to achieve in healthcare, then that's a big gap. And I didn't have the opportunity to ask a question about this in the form of a survey because obviously I had to do that in the previous presentation. But when I've had this slide up and I had a questionnaire that was going on during the presentation, and I asked the folks who work in healthcare supply chain if they think they can match this sort of a performance. Many of them think that we can, or we can do even better. There's no really fundamental reason why we couldn't. So then let us look at what can be done and what can we do to make some progress, starting from where we are today and going to a future which may be similar to the one we illustrated in the video. So let's talk about standards. First I'll now give the responses that you filled in on the survey, and I'll break it up by the sectors which you marked down as yourself representing. So we have a good mix with healthcare, financial industry, retail, and transportation and logistics, and a big group of other folks. So if you remember, the first question was, do you think standards have generated a lot of value in your sector already, or how much potential is still left? So if we look at this, I think the common theme is that people across sectors feel that yes, there has been a lot of value from standards, and that's been a very good thing, right? Because the middle bucket here is quite big, and then the rest of the people are roughly halfly divided between, well, we haven't done much yet, and we've captured most of the value. And of course, the one thing that I think is different, and the sample is not very big, so this is not very rigorous statistically, but if we look at the numbers for healthcare, I think there, in contrast to all the other slides, the people feel there has not been much value yet. The value for the top for the top bucket there is a lot bigger. So it seems that people feel in healthcare maybe there's more room still to catch up than in other sectors. And then the second question was in terms of challenges, right? So there's a lot of challenges related to implementing and using standards. So what are the themes that we saw in the different sectors here? Well, I marked the top responses for each sector in dark blue to make them come out a little bit more strongly. And in fact, I'm not sure there is a common trend across sectors here. That could just mean that that all of these challenges are big, and so we're not sure if there's one clear challenge there. If anything, it's the challenge of not wanting to invest before anyone else does, which is coming back a few times. But otherwise, it's quite it's quite spread out across the different elements. So I think this just reinforces the discussion we had earlier today around requiring a lot of work and a lot of coordination to solve the challenge of using standards. Then, in terms of where you see the impact of standards and where do you see value being created, here it does look very clear that there's common trends here. Efficiency, number one, reducing complexity, and the third is ensuring quality and reliability out of products and services. So that's very clear here, and I think that all makes sense. That that would be relevant in any sector. I think if anything, if I look here, there were a few responses that were more geared, I think, towards, again, more like innovation, growth, enabling new business models. They didn't come out very strongly here, and I'm not sure why. It could obviously be because those might be longer-term possibilities, and the first thing you think about in terms of standards is efficiency and simplicity, but hopefully in the long run, we are going to see some of these other benefits, right, that point to more possibilities and more growth as well. And then in terms of the functional area, where where you see the most value, I think it's a little bit dependent on the sector here, and I think that makes sense. I mean, distribution and supply chain is a clear one that comes out, and service operations also, and then transactions for finance, that makes a lot of sense, and the other ones are a little bit smaller. So people see a lot of value in those few areas. So that is that's for the survey. Hopefully that was interesting to see a little bit of your thoughts played back, and what your colleagues either in your sector or in other sectors feel about the challenges and the value of standards. So when we think about supply chain standards in healthcare, and I'm going to switch now to sort of talk about the findings from the report, which by the way, just to introduce this effort, this was something that we did over 4 or 5 months together with GS1 Global Office, several of the MOs, and many other experts across the healthcare sector. We interviewed about 80 or more people from different parts of the healthcare sector, from manufacturers to providers, and in many different countries of the world. So they helped us to bring together our findings. And so I had a few areas of value in the survey. When we tried to put that together and build a little framework around that in terms of what are the different areas that we think standards can help in healthcare, there's a few different levels. And of course, in healthcare, regulatory requirements are very important, and standards will in part be driven by these requirements, because here in Europe there's the Falsified Medicines Directive. In the US we have e-pedigree or other things that are in development. Medical devices have the UDI requirement, and many of these obviously have to use, or all of these enables standards in an important way. So the first step there is, well, you know, if you're in healthcare, you have to, over the next few years, if you haven't already, adopt standards in order to meet these requirements. And that gives a number of immediate benefits, whether it's reduction in counterfeits, making recalls more effective, and have several other public health benefits. I think the message that we want to give, and what we spend a lot of time on in the report, is to think these requirements are out there. That's fine. It is quite complicated and quite costly to implement those. There are a lot of other things you can do now with that kind of a foundation. There are relatively more modest investments that can be made that give either efficiency benefits or other benefits, which are obviously not the intention of the regulatory requirements, or not the primary objective. But the next sort of step of options, and we've talked about those, are the various efficiency ones. It's having better visibility into the supply chain that allows us to reduce inventory and improve service levels. It is related to transactions and making fewer errors. The next area of benefit that we see is what we're calling the treatment chain effectiveness. So this is everything to do with how services are delivered to patients, or how patients use healthcare services or medications at home. And these are things like scanning at the bedside to avoid medical errors. It's tracking people's use of drugs to improve compliance to prescriptions. This is a little bit more complicated to do these things, but in the end, this has impact on cost, but obviously on patient safety and quality of care. So it's very important. The last area on the right there around information-enabled transformation, it's a little bit the vision that we showed in the video. So once you have a supply chain that's connected in all its different parts and is operating with standards, you can really do a lot of creative and interesting things. Probably we don't even think about them. They're not obvious, like increasing visibility, reducing inventory, avoiding errors. I'm sure that you and colleagues in the future will be very creative and come up with many other things, similar to when the UPC and the barcode symbol were invented in the 1970s. Nobody had any clue how much innovation would come from that, and and how that would transform the grocery store and how that works, and the products we were able to buy there, etc. So we're hopeful that standards will be able to deliver a lot of this sort of exciting innovation that we can't really predict or see right now in healthcare as well. In the Strength and Unity report, though, we tried to keep it a little bit simple and keep it concrete. So we tried to quantify the value in a number of areas where either certain companies were already benefiting from standards, so we have concrete examples, or where it's very near term and where we can have a good handle on how standards can help improve it. And we wanted to show everyone that these benefits are very tangible instead of far off in the future. So we looked at a number of things, right? So having scanners in hospitals, having ID on patients and nurses, and then scanning before patients are given medication will avoid medication errors, very, very important. We looked at recall efficiency, the speed of which we can identify problematic products in the supply chain, and also the effectiveness, how well we can find them and remove them. We looked at counterfeits, sort of how many counterfeits are out there, what is the impact on patients, and what can serialization do to stop those products. We looked at the efficiency levers we already talked about. How much could we save in inventory? How much better could we do in reducing product waste, which, by the way, is about $50 billion globally. So I don't know how big the economy of Greece is exactly, but that's, you just can imagine how much wasted money there is simply by products that are expiring before they're used. We also looked at sort of the administrative aspect of supply chain, right? The ordering process, reconciling purchase orders, keeping up master data, etc. So data management costs, and then the transaction accuracy piece. We built estimates for sort of the errors which are made in all of these processes, the cost associated with them, and then through the interviews and through case studies and our own experience, we made estimates for the sort of the global potential in improvement here, and this is just a summary of the numbers, right? So somewhere between 40 and $100 billion of cost we think can be removed globally. We could save tens of thousands of lives by avoiding errors and removing counterfeit products. Inventory reduction could be worth maybe $60 billion in capital, and it's not just lives saved, right? It's a lot of people necessarily don't die from medical errors, but they are disabled for the rest of their life. So big value there also. You'll find the details in the report. This is a bit of a detailed breakdown that's probably hard to read from the back in the room, but what we did was, again, as I said, in all of these 7 or 8 areas, we built up the cost estimates, and then we made improvement estimates against each of them. So whether it's 30% in reduction in medication errors in terms of lives saved, and then the cost reductions associated with all of the normal processes that are happening in the supply chain. Now, one thing that was really interesting to us, and although we believed in the value of standards at the beginning of this, we were also surprised to find that the benefits are shared across the entire supply chain. It's not true that, say, all of the benefit is going to go to the manufacturers and hospitals will have to invest, but they are not going to see the benefit. When we did this accounting of who is likely to see benefits where, we found that there is a very good business case for everyone here. So it's not that obviously is great news, because it, first of all, I think opens the door to more collaboration, because you will have to work together to make this happen and to realize this value, and then also that I think these benefits can be shared. So on the road forward then, knowing that there's quite a good business case, that the future is exciting, what should be done to get moving? Of course, a lot of things are moving in different places of the world already. In many places, they are isolated efforts, and it's hard to do something comprehensive. But what we try to give a push for is for the industry to collaborate more on this, to define within a country or a region or a set of trading partners, to define really how to go about and capture this value and benefit patients by defining what their objectives would be, by agreeing on a couple of use cases that they can go after. So maybe it's something like recalls, or maybe it's something like reducing product write-offs, and say, like, we're going to implement standards and we're going to prioritize these few opportunities and really make that work to get some tangible examples of impact. And then of course, important to establish timelines and milestones that can be tracked. This is sort of based off of also the success that we've seen in the retail sector, even back in the 70s and 80s. And if you look back, you can learn a lot from how that happened. So that's pretty much it. So I had the good fortune to come here and speak to you about it. But obviously had several colleagues who worked on this together with me, and we sort of jointly together do the work in global standards and serialization. Any of us is obviously happy to follow up with anyone for further questions or discussions on this. If you would like to see that video that I played for you, there is we have our operations practice has a website, so you can register for free, and you can see the video. You can download many other articles. There's a lot here on all of the sectors that we talked about in terms of the operations area. So it could be a good resource.